At exactly 12:01 a.m., the quiet in dozens of neighborhoods shattered, doors splintered, lights cut through the darkness, and voices thundered commands as federal agents swarmed 42 locations in near-perfect synchronization. Within minutes, high-ranking members of MS-13 and the Trinitarios were face down on the ground, stunned by the speed and precision of an operation that had been months, maybe years, in the making. What unfolded that night wasn't a chaotic scene for those who planned it. It was the result of meticulous intelligence, exhaustive surveillance, and a level of coordination that can only happen when multiple agencies move as one. A midnight raid of this size is never random or improvised. It is a result of disciplined planning that weaves together dozens of moving parts. Before any doors kicked in, federal agents from the FBI, ICE, Homeland Security investigations, and local police do the painstaking, invisible work that makes such moments possible. They map the routines of their targets, track phones, vehicles, and associates, and collect enough evidence to satisfy the exacting standards of federal judges who sign off on the warrants. Every piece of intelligence is validated and cross-checked before being slotted into a broader strategy. This strategy aims to dismantle not just individuals, but the command structures that keep these gangs alive. The stakes are high. MS-13 and the Trinitarios are not small-time crews. They are transnational organizations with deep roots in drug trafficking, extortion, and violence that crosses borders and generations. Letting a single target slip through the net risks unraveling months of work and putting agents' lives in danger by tipping off others. That's why these operations are rehearsed over and over, often in nondescript facilities far from public view. Teams walk through entry sequences, communications protocols, and contingencies for everything from armed resistance to booby-trapped locations. When the night comes, everyone knows their role down to the second. What makes these raids so powerful is not just the element of surprise, it's the psychological shockwave they send through the underworld. Gang leaders build their empires on the illusion of being invulnerable, thriving on fear and projecting the idea that they are untouchable. But when dozens of key figures are dragged out of their safe houses in a single night, that illusion collapses. Associates scatter, informants emerge, and rival factions seize the moment to distance themselves or cooperate with law enforcement. It's not just about arrests, it's about destabilizing criminal ecosystems that rely on stability and secrecy to function. Consider the level of surveillance required to track 42 high-priority targets simultaneously.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Federal agents build complex mosaics of data, cell tower pings, financial transactions, and human intelligence, layered over weeks or months until they can predict where a target will sleep, who they will meet, and when they will be most vulnerable. This information is fiercely guarded and parceled out only to those directly involved in the operation to prevent leaks that could compromise lives. The legal side of the operation is just as intense. Every raid has to withstand scrutiny in court, which means airtight warrants, properly documented chains of evidence, and clear demonstrations that each arrest serves a larger criminal case. Timing is everything. Midnight raids aren't chosen for dramatic effect, they're about minimizing risk. In those pre-dawn hours, targets are more likely to be home, less likely to be armed or surrounded by civilians, and more disoriented when the breach comes. That split-second advantage can be the difference between a clean arrest and a shootout. Agents are trained to capitalize on that moment of confusion, overwhelming suspects with speed and coordination before resistance can form. It's a surgical, not chaotic process, and the precision is what keeps both the public and the agents safe. The agencies involved rarely release full timelines, but patterns from similar operations show how long these cases take to build. It starts with intelligence. Tips from informants, intercepted communications, or patterns in violent crimes that point to specific individuals. Then comes surveillance and infiltration, sometimes by undercover agents or through digital channels. Once enough evidence is in place, federal prosecutors work with investigators to secure the necessary warrants, a process that can take weeks on its own. Only when every piece is ready does the operation move to the execution phase, with teams deployed to each location, often rehearsing routes and contingencies for days leading up to the raids. What the public sees, a flurry of arrests and dramatic headlines, is just the tip of an iceberg built on thousands of hours of patient, careful work. These are dangerous people, often armed and unpredictable, and the margin for error is razor thin. Agents know that a single misstep can cost lives or compromise the entire mission. That's why, when the green light finally comes, the operations are swift and decisive. By dawn, most of the primary targets are in custody, evidence is secured, and teams are already shifting into the next phase: processing, interrogations, and the legal machinery that will carry the cases forward. For communities terrorized by gang violence, the morning after is marked by a strange silence. For some, it's a moment of relief, a sign that the violence that's claimed friends, family, and neighbors might finally loosen its grip. For others, it's a reminder of the depth of the problem, as they know that cutting off the head of the snake doesn't always kill the body. Gang structures are resilient, and younger recruits often rise to replace those taken down. But each operation chips away at that structure, making it harder for the gangs to operate with the same confidence and reach. Officials are quick to emphasize that these raids aren't random acts of enforcement. They are part of a broader strategy aimed at dismantling criminal organizations, not just jailing individual members. By targeting leadership and key operatives simultaneously, the goal is to fracture the chain of command, disrupt financial flows, and create opportunities for further intelligence gathering. It's a calculated strike designed to do maximum damage to the operational backbone of these groups. From a legal standpoint, these operations feed into complex federal cases that often span years. Charges like racketeering conspiracy, murder, extortion, and drug trafficking are built on evidence gathered long before the raids. Prosecutors use the arrests to strengthen their cases, turning lower-level members into cooperating witnesses and building narratives that can take down entire networks. The raids are tightly controlled so that every interaction, every seized device, and every recovered document becomes part of a puzzle designed to secure convictions that will withstand appeals and legal challenges.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
For the communities affected, the symbolism of these raids matters almost as much as the arrests themselves. They send a message that the federal government hasn't forgotten the neighborhoods where violence has become routine, and that the families caught in the crossfire aren't invisible. In places where trust in law enforcement has eroded, that message can be the first step in rebuilding cooperation, encouraging residents to share information that can prevent the next cycle of violence before it starts. The fight against gangs like MS-13 and the Trinitarios is long, grinding, and often frustrating. Taking down one cell doesn't end the problem. It buys time, disrupts patterns, and creates openings for deeper investigations. But every major raid sends shockwaves through the criminal underworld, forcing gangs to expend energy rebuilding, re-establishing trust, and reconfiguring their networks. That disruption, multiplied over time, is what makes lasting change possible. By the time the sun rose the morning after those 42 coordinated raids, the narrative had shifted. Dozens of high-value targets were in custody. Weapons and drugs were off the streets, and federal agencies had demonstrated, once again, that even the most entrenched criminal organizations are vulnerable to methodical, relentless pressure. The headlines told one story, a dramatic takedown, but the deeper truth was quieter, more enduring. This was the result of discipline, patience, and an unwavering commitment to the communities most affected by gang violence. The simultaneous arrests didn't just remove dangerous individuals, they disrupted entire networks, seized critical intelligence, and gave prosecutors leverage they had never had before. It was the kind of strategic victory that doesn't end with the night of the raid. but ripples forward, shaping cases and policy decisions for years to come. It started with a dawn that didn't feel like any other in Nassau County. Sirens cut through quiet suburban streets, unmarked vans lined curbs, and tactical teams moved with precision honed by months of planning. By sunrise, 42 alleged members of MS-13, the Trinitarios, and the 18th Street Gang were in custody. Men who had stalked neighborhoods, turned playgrounds into hunting grounds, and left families living in fear were now in handcuffs, their faces splashed across every screen in Long Island. It was one of the largest gang takedowns in the county's history, and the weight of that moment was impossible to ignore. Standing before the cameras that afternoon, Nassau County officials didn't mince words. The police chief called it a direct message to anyone who thinks they can terrorize our communities. Your time is up. The county executive promised zero tolerance, his voice steady but sharp. We will not let violent gangs dictate how our residents live, he said. We will protect our neighborhoods, and we will do it together. The tone was unmistakable. This was more than a bust. It was a declaration of war on gang violence. For years, these gangs had operated like a shadow government, enforcing their own rules through brutality. Residents whispered about the murders, the beatings, the disappearances. When bodies were found, the names were often familiar. Teenagers, neighbors, kids who'd once played ball on the same fields as everyone else. That's why, when the images of those 42 suspects in custody began to circulate, the reaction was visceral. Relief, validation, and hope that the nightmare might finally be ending. The operation hit where it mattered most: leadership and logistics. Those arrested weren't just low-level soldiers or street corner dealers. They were the coordinators, the men who turned local violence into organized business. They controlled drug routes, stretching from Central America to East Coast neighborhoods, managed extortion schemes that drained millions from small businesses, and oversaw the flow of firearms that armed crews on the street. By removing them in one coordinated sweep, law enforcement didn't just take down individuals. They severed key links in the operational chains that keep these enterprises functioning. Overnight, phones went unanswered, money transfers stalled, and distribution hubs were left scrambling without direction. The gangs are, at their core, logistics machines. They thrive not only because of their brutality, but because of their ability to reliably move product, collect cash, and maintain fear-based control of their territories. Take out the operators who manage those flows, and you don't just cause chaos, you hit their bottom line. In the days following the sweep, several cities reported unusual slowdowns in the distribution of street-level narcotics, a sign that the intricate supply chains were indeed reeling. For communities living under the shadow of these gangs, even a temporary pause in operations can mean fewer overdoses, fewer shootings, and a rare window of breathing room. However, power vacuums in organizations built on violence rarely stay empty for long. When leaders are arrested, rival factions, sometimes even within the same gang, compete to fill the void. And that competition is bloody and dangerous for everyone caught in the middle. History is filled with examples of takedowns that sparked weeks of retaliatory violence as crews fought to control newly leaderless corners. Intelligence sources have already flagged chatter suggesting that some MS-13 cliques are eyeing the territories left exposed by these arrests, setting the stage for a wave of turf wars unless pressure remains consistent and overwhelming. This is why law enforcement is committed to relentless pressure and continuous investigations. Understanding why these sweeps matter requires a closer look at how gangs like MS-13 and the Trinitarios operate. They are decentralized but interconnected, with cliques spread across cities and even countries, all linked through shared rules, loyalty codes, and economic goals. These cliques are like nodes in a larger network, and when law enforcement coordinates across jurisdictions, it can disrupt multiple nodes simultaneously. That's what makes a multi-city sweep so potent. It doesn't just remove one player, it destabilizes the system itself. And while the gangs often adapt, re-establishing those networks takes time, resources, and trust, commodities that become scarce when leaders are behind bars and operatives are under surveillance. The success of this latest sweep wasn't accidental. It was the product of months of coordination between federal, state, and local authorities, pooling data and surveillance to map networks that spanned multiple states. That kind of collaboration is essential because gangs like MS-13 and the Trinitarios don't respect jurisdictional boundaries. A member arrested in New York might have direct ties to operations in Baltimore, Los Angeles, or even Central America. Without a coordinated approach, enforcement becomes a game of whack-a-mole, with gangs exploiting gaps in communication to stay one step ahead. From a broader perspective, these operations also send a powerful psychological message. For years, gangs have thrived on the perception of invincibility, the belief that no matter how many arrests are made, the machine keeps running. High-profile, coordinated sweeps shatter that myth. They show both gang members and the communities they terrorize that the state can and will dismantle even the most entrenched networks when the right resources and strategies are applied. That psychological shift can have ripple effects, reducing recruitment, encouraging cooperation with investigators, and undermining the culture of fear that sustains gang dominance. The war against MS-13 and the Trinitarios isn't over. What's unfolding now is the final surgical phase of a decades-long campaign, one that no longer focuses on just putting away foot soldiers or reacting to bursts of violence. Federal and local law enforcement, armed with intelligence, indictments, and a level of coordination that didn't exist 10 years ago, are zeroing in on the structural backbone of these gangs. Every move, every arrest, every wiretap is part of a strategy designed to do one thing: erase these networks from the map piece by piece until the remnants collapse under their own weight. At the top of the list are the regional shot callers. These are the architects, the ones who coordinate drug shipments from Central America, authorize hits in U.S. cities, and maintain quiet but crucial ties with cartel intermediaries in Mexico. For MS-13 and the Trinitarios, these leaders are the spine of the organization. When one falls, another rises to replace him. But with modern surveillance, intelligence fusion centers, and RICO statutes, law enforcement is no longer chasing shadows. They're mapping networks, identifying weak points, and targeting leaders in synchronized raids that leave no room for escape. The next layer of this campaign focuses on the fissures within the gangs themselves. Internal rivalries, power struggles, and generational conflicts have splintered MS-13 in ways that were unthinkable a decade ago. Law enforcement is exploiting these fractures, turning informants from rival factions, intercepting communications, and using the chaos to dismantle cells that might have otherwise operated under the radar. Every splinter creates an opening, and prosecutors are driving wedges deep into the cracks, dismantling operations before they can stabilize. At the operational core, investigators are going after the money and the logistics. By targeting these revenue streams, law enforcement isn't just arresting individuals, they're starving the beast. Every shipment seized, every account frozen, and every courier arrested chips away at the financial foundation that has sustained these gangs for decades. The most dangerous and strategically significant connections are the alliances these gangs maintain with larger transnational crime organizations. MS-13 and the Trinitarios have long worked hand-in-hand with Mexican cartels. These partnerships have allowed the gangs to punch above their weight, securing access to bulk narcotics, sophisticated firearms, and international distribution channels. Cutting these ties is a priority, and law enforcement is deploying specialized task forces to trace communications, intercept shipments, and break the trust that underpins these alliances. Without cartel backing, the gangs lose both their supply lines and their aura of untouchability. The legal framework powering this crackdown is as aggressive as the operational tactics. RICO prosecutions, designed to treat criminal organizations as enterprises rather than isolated crimes, are being deployed with brutal efficiency. Entire cliques are swept up in single indictments, their leaders, enforcers, and facilitators all facing federal charges that carry decades-long sentences. Task forces are at the center of this effort, coordinating across jurisdictions, pooling intelligence, and ensuring that when arrests happen, They're decisive and crippling. It's no longer about arresting one member at a time. It's about decapitating entire operational nodes in one strike. What's happening inside the United States is mirrored by a growing network of international cooperation. Law enforcement agencies are working directly with authorities in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico to track leadership figures, share intelligence, and build extradition cases that bring key players to U.S. courts. This cross-border collaboration represents a new era of enforcement, one where the old safe havens no longer exist. Leaders who once issued orders from Central American strongholds now find themselves hunted, their movements tracked, their communications monitored, and their options dwindling by the day. This whole-of-government approach, combining domestic prosecutions, international partnerships, intelligence sharing, and relentless operational pressure, has already shown results. In city after city, cliques that once terrorized neighborhoods are being dismantled. The effect is cumulative. Every arrest disrupts coordination. Every asset seizure limits resources. Every conviction sends a message. The old rules no longer apply, and the days of impunity are over. For the agents and prosecutors on the front lines, there's a clear understanding. This isn't just another operation. It's a turning point. Every coordinated takedown, every successful extradition, every dismantled clique moves the needle closer to a reality where MS-13 and the Trinitarios are no longer dominant forces, but fragmented, weakened remnants incapable of the violence and control they once wielded. The pressure will not ease. New technologies, data analytics, forensic accounting, AI-driven surveillance are being leveraged to predict and disrupt gang movements before they materialize into violence. The message is unmistakable. There will be no pause, no reprieve, until these networks are reduced to shadows of their former selves. And that's the ultimate goal. Not just arrests, not just headlines, but a lasting dismantling. A world where these gangs are no longer a generational threat, but a cautionary tale. The lesson will be clear. Even the most entrenched, violent, and transnational networks can be taken apart when intelligence, coordination, and relentless focus converge. For communities long held hostage by fear, that outcome would mean more than just safety. It would mean reclaiming their streets, their schools, their futures. And for law enforcement, it would stand as proof that patience, precision, and persistence can finish what brute force alone never could. The systematic erasure of gangs that once believed themselves untouchable. The countdown has already begun. Every day, the walls close in a little tighter. The leaders who once gave orders with impunity are now isolated, hunted, and vulnerable. The financial streams that once seemed limitless are drying up. The alliances that once made them powerful are fraying. This is what the endgame looks like. Not a single, dramatic takedown, but a relentless, grinding dismantling that leaves no space for resurgence. When the history of this fight is written, it won't just be about violence and arrests. It will be about the quiet, methodical work that stripped these organizations of their power, cut them off from their resources, and broke the fear that kept communities silent. And in that history, one truth will stand out, that even the most notorious gangs in the Western Hemisphere can be brought to their knees when every level of government, every partner, and every community commits to the same goal, finishing what was started and finally closing the chapter on an era of terror.